Hello, everyone. I'm Ulrich Sidney. I'm the president of the Association of Future African Neurosurgeons. And today we'll have a fantastic and anticipated talk from Mr. Desmond Jumbam. Before we introduce our guest speaker today, we'll do what we usually do, which is go around and have everyone present themselves. So when I call your name, please unmute your mic, tell us who you are, where you're from, what you do. So we'll start with Olaoluwa. Please present yourself.
Yeah, I'm Olaoluwa Ezekiel Dada. I'm from University of Ibadan, Nigeria. I'm a second-year medical student.
Thanks. CBMJ.
Yeah, hello. I am Celestin Bilong, fourth-year medical student, the Faculty of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences of University of Yaoundé. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Next up, the Darwin Sichimba.
Hello everyone, my name is Darwin Chimba. I'm a fifth-year medical student at the Copperbelt University School of Medicine, Zambia. Thank you, I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you, Darwin. Next up, Ndale Genevieve.
Hello everyone, my name is Indale Genevieve, fourth-year medical student at the University of Buea in Cameroon. I'm also member of communication and operation team of AFAN. Thank you.
Thank you, Ndale. Gideon is not available at the moment because he's working on some other stuff. But Gideon is from the UK, a medical student at Barts and the London in London, United Kingdom. A very active member of AFAN as well. Next up is Holden. Please present yourself.
Hi, this is Holden Abdi. I am a third-year medical student at the University of Minnesota, and I'm currently in Ethiopia for 1 month. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much for joining us, Holden. Next up on the list is Neontle Sakaiwa.
Hello everyone, my name is Neontle Sakaiwa. I'm from the University of Botswana. I've been doing my second year in medical school. I'm just starting my third year, and it hasn't been a while that I've joined AFAN, and I'm hoping to work well with everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Neontle. Tia Shambela.
Hello, I'm called Udo Pierre Chamberlain. I am a fourth-year medical student in the University of Buea, Faculty of Health Sciences. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, Dr. Toivo Hashila.
Hi guys, my name is Toivo Hashela. I'm a senior registrar in neurosurgery. I've completed my residency with the University of Zimbabwe and originally from Namibia.
Thank you so much, Dr. Toivo, for joining us today. Wapre Senyoy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Wapre Senyoy, fourth-year medical students from the University of Buea, Cameroon. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Wapre. Tariq Fadala.
Hello everyone, my name is Tariq Fadalla. I'm a junior doctor, currently working as a research fellow at Rabat Neurospine Center from Khartoum, Sudan.
Oh, great, fantastic. Vaishnavi Govind.
Hi everyone, my name is Vaishnavi. I go by Vaishi for short. I'm a current second-year med student at St. George's University based in Grenada. Kind of heard about your meeting through Incision. I'm the current National Working Group Chair of Incision Grenada.
Thank you so much for joining us. I think we've presented everyone at the moment. If I missed you, I'm sorry. I'm trying to go really quickly down the list. I think, yeah, everyone. And finally, Zolo Ivan. So Zolo has a point and a connection. I'll just present Zolo myself. Zolo Ivan is CTA medical student from Cameroon at the University of Boya. He's equally the head of communications and operations at AFAN. And he's the brains behind organizing all these conferences and webinars. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we'll have a very anticipated presentation from Desmond Jumbam. So Mr. Desmond is a health policy consultant he's currently based in Accra, Ghana. He works with Operation Smile, which is an international NGO operating in over 30 countries, advising and leading the organization on health system strengthening programs, as well as health policy and advocacy engagements. He also leads research projects specifically focused on implementation science and health financing for surgical care and LMICs. Prior to joining Operation Smile, Mr. Jumbam was a health policy analyst with the program in global surgery and social change at Harvard Medical School, where he led and advised the development of national surgical, obstetric, and anesthesia plans in several countries, including Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Pakistan. Mr. Jumbam holds a Master of Science in Global Health from the University of Notre Dame and a Bachelor of Arts in Biological Science from Taylor University. He's literally my brother, like my brother. Every time we have a conversation together, he always comes up with fantastic ideas and questions, and I think it'll be you will find it just as entertaining as I do on a daily basis. Thank you so much for agreeing to give this talk today, Desmond. Please go ahead, unmute your mic, and you can share your screen.
Thank you so much, Ulrich. And it's very nice to meet everyone on the call. It's actually truly an honor for me to be with you guys and to, hopefully have a very productive discussion on global surgery, global health, research equity. I've been following the work of AFAN, since I met Ulrich, and I've been thoroughly impressed by all the work that you've all been doing. So let me try to share my screen here. And do let me know if you can see it. Okay,
yes, we can see it.
Screen? Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm very excited to be talking to you all. And today we'll be talking about research collaborations between the Global South and the North. My talk is entitled Between a Rock and a Hard Place. And that's just, I guess it's an idiom of, being stuck in between two unideal situations. You're stuck in two dilemmas. So again, once again, thank you for inviting me. Let's see here. Okay, so this is the roadmap for the talk that I'll be giving. First, I'll share a little bit about myself so that you have an idea of my, a bit personal, but also academic career background so far. And then we'll talk about the rock. What's the rock in the collaborations between Global South and North, and what's the hard place? And then how do you get out of being stuck between this rock and this hard place? So first, a little bit about myself. Like Ulrich mentioned, I'm from Cameroon. I was born and raised there. I completed my primary, secondary, and high school education there. This is a picture of my graduation. I was from a poor family, but I've had quite a few blessings throughout my life. People have been quite generous to me. So when I was in Cameroon, I had the opportunity of attending Rainforest International School, which is arguably one of the best schools in the country. That was extremely fortunate. And being at that school opened up the opportunity for me to travel to the US to study. So in 2010, I went to Delaware. So I started my associate's degree, which is in the US, it's a 2-year program, usually pre-university. And so I started my associate's degree in biotechnology, and I did that from 2010 to 2012. But then after that, I transferred to Taylor University, which is in nowhere, in the middle of nowhere, America, quite rural, surrounded by cornfields, but a very beautiful campus. And there I did my Bachelor of Arts in Biological Sciences. I graduated in 2015. And it was at Taylor that I got my first exposure to research. We did some research as part of our curriculum, but I also remember spending, I believe, the summer of 2014 doing some basic wet lab research in the biology departments. And so this is a picture of electrophoresis. We're trying to extract taste receptors from T1R3 receptors from pig liver cells. But what I realized from this is that wet lab is not for me. It was absolutely not what I was interested in. It requires a lot of patience, and I also didn't find it as interesting. But the other thing that I had the opportunity to do this because my staff, my professors and my mentors were quite supportive, and they had grants that allowed me to just spend the entire summer doing this research. After Taylor, I went on not too far from Taylor to the University of Notre Dame in Indiana, and there I got my master's in global health. Master of Science in Global Health, and that was a 1-year program. That's the picture of Notre Dame's campus with the main landmark building, the Golden Dome. In this master's program, I feel like this was really my deep dive into global health, what it is, into global health research. And I got to learn about basic methodology, how to write a proposal, how to do literature reviews, methodology, stats, and all of that. Developing things like timelines and budgets, all these things that are related to research. And a core part of this program is doing a capstone. So throughout the year, you have to develop it's kind of like your thesis. So you develop your thesis in partnership with the support of your mentor and a number of advisors. And then you get to do that research in the summer, come back and defend. So for me, my research was in Zambia, in rural Zambia, where I studied the perceptions of like caregivers' perceptions of different malaria interventions. How do they, do they use mosquito nets? How do they feel about mosquito nets? Indoor residual spraying. So that was quite an immersive experience to spend this time in Zambia. And out of this research, I got one publication. So this was my first publication. And you'll notice that it's published in 2020, although I finished my program in 2016. So it took about 3 years, 2 rejections, from Malaria Journal and from BMC Public Health, and then I had to contest the decision from BMC Public Health. But this took 3 years to get my first author publication done. But a key reason why this was successful was because I had mentorship. I had the support of an amazing supervisor, research supervisor at University of Notre Dame, Dr. Nicole Ashe, who just kept pushing me and kept supporting me and checking up on me. Otherwise, I mean, in 3 years, to be honest with you, I would have given up. It's especially with your first paper. But again, Dr. Ashe was very, very supportive. So I'm extremely grateful for her mentorship. And then after Notre Dame, when I graduated, I went on to the program in global surgery and social change at Harvard. And there I was hired as a research assistant to work on a project called Safe Surgery 2020, which was in mostly in Ethiopia and Tanzania. But much of my work focused in Tanzania, where I worked with the Ministry of Health to develop their first national surgical anesthesia and obstetric plan. And you know, this was the first NSOAP that Tanzania developed, and I played a you know, I was one of the co-leads in developing this plan. So this was again, you know, an immersion into the health policy realm, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. At PGSSC, as Ulrich would know, you know, there's a rich kind of environment that fosters, you know, research and research ideas and collaboration. So I benefited immensely from that, but also from you know, mentorship from people like Dr. John Mira, Mark Schrein, and others. These are just for your reference. These are just a few of my academic outputs. So this piece in the Lancet was published earlier this year. This one in BMJ Global Health on the development of the Tanzanian NSOAP. Innovative financing for surgery in BMJ Global Health. How much does it cost to scale up surgical systems? This one just a few weeks ago on surgical referrals in Tanzania. A review. And I had the honor of also, you know, contributing to this piece that Ulrich led along with a few of you on barriers and facilitators to research in Cameroon. So currently with Operation Smile, I mean, my principal role is as a health policy advisor. So my research focuses on policy analysis. So for example, you know, we're currently working with our team in Madagascar and the Ministry of Health to analyze the development of their national plan for surgical development, which you know, is quite unique in the sense that it was homegrown and it was developed by the Ministry of Health themselves, and it took quite a bit of time to develop. But the other projects that I'm working on is on implementation science. So with this project, I'm trying to understand what are the different contextual factors that can affect whether a surgical system strengthening project is successful or not. So these are things like, you know, political climate, institutional capacity, the different team dynamics, you know, within the surgical teams. And then the other project, again, in Madagascar is focused on, you know, we're doing an intervention to assess, you know, different financing solutions for surgical patients, again, to inform UHC in Madagascar. So now let's turn to the core of the talk, which is between a rock and a hard place. So it's clear that there's some benefits to collaborating, especially in research, but in so many things, right? It's usually better to work with others than to work alone in most instances, because you know, people bring a wealth of information and expertise that you may not have. And so by working with other people, you enrich yourself and you enrich the final products that you develop. So it's the same in research, right? So to collaborate with others, you know, you exchange ideas, you know, from different fields. You know, you can work with sociologists, you can work with economists, you can work with people from different parts of Africa, from different parts of Asia, the US, that have very different experiences. And so that enriches your research. And there's actually evidence for this, right? There's some research in Nature and Science that shows that there's a positive correlation, not collaboration, correlation between the number of authors on a particular research paper and the research and the impact factor of that paper. So collaboration is a good thing. Again, it also allows for sharing of equipment and resources, It can open up access to funding for especially researchers in LMICs where resources are limited. So what is this rock that I keep referring to? So the rock in a nutshell is, even though collaborations between the North, the global North and the global South, in the US and in Europe are generally good, there are some practices that still remain within the field that could be considered colonialistic, but also exploitative. And that is a focus of this editorial that I recently published in BMJ Global Health. So it's a satire that makes fun of these exploitative research practices that still persist from the global North, and it's important for you young researchers to be aware of this. So you can describe some of these research practices as kind of parachutes and parasites. So researchers from the global North parachute into a community in Cameroon or in India, with research proposals that they developed from the North, collect data in that community, like parasites, but not the symbiotic types of parasites. And then they go back to their institutions and do the analysis and publish the findings in their mostly northern journals, and sometimes behind paywalls that even the researchers in those communities will never have access to. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about the rock. That's what I mean when I talk about that rock that you're stuck between. So research priorities, again, still set by for the South by the North. Research funding still mostly available for the North. And this creates what some have called the little brother effect, right? So the South is seen as the little brother, while the North is seen as the big brother. And so researchers in the South are seen as beneficiaries of research and expertise from the North. Researchers from the South don't often have decision-making capacity. And can you really call something a collaboration if there's no shared decision making and responsibility between the different parties involved? And again, the South, researchers from the South are seen as employees and data collectors and really not partners, which is very troublesome and dangerous for researchers from the South. Often, researchers from the South are not given credit for their contributions. The findings are published again behind paywalls in northern journals. And this is not only a health issue, right? The largest repository for health information on Africa is found outside the continent, right? So this is health, but you can also look at things like history, right? So archives of history, African history, most of them can be found at institutions like Northwestern, Harvard University, and Oxford University. I have a friend who is at Northwestern, and the main reason he's there is because that has the largest archives of African history. So it's a big problem, not just in the health sector. So this picture is a clip from one of the articles that I was trying to assess for this while I was preparing for this talk. And ironically, the article is about barriers to research equity, but then again, I couldn't access it because it was locked behind this $44, $200 fine fee by the journal. So this is not just something that I'm postulating, right? There's some research that has been done around this. So for example, this study in BMJ Global Health by Mbaye and their colleagues found, they did a review of research studies between 1980 and 2016, infectious diseases in Africa. And they were able to find over 1,000 articles. And of those articles, 93% had at least one Africa-based author, which, you can say that's a good thing. But then if you look at, the first author and the last author positions, which are the most prestigious, most esteemed positions of authorship, you find that only 50% were African first author and 41% had an African last author. So this is a well-known and researched problem. And just again, about 3 weeks ago or so, we came across this article on, some invasive carcinomas in Ghana, right? And none of the authors on the paper were from Ghana at all. But there were supposedly data samples that were extracted from Ghana and taken to these places in the US, analyzed and published without anybody from Ghana being on the piece. So this is extremely troublesome, and we need to find a way to deal with it. This is a very famous example of a research collaboration between North and South that went terribly wrong. And also, so there's the Congolese doctor and scientist, research scientist, Dr. Jean-Jacques Muyembe. In 1973, he went and studied in Belgium. He studied microbiology, got his PhD, but then decided that he wanted to go back to DRC to work with his people. But then when he returned there, he realized that it's hard to practice as a microbiologist, do research, if you don't have the mice and if you don't have the infrastructure to do that research. So he became a field epidemiologist. But then there was news of some bizarre disease that had broken off in one of the villages. And so they invited him to come and check it out. And so he went, and at the one hospital there were just two people at the hospital, because everybody had fled the hospital because they thought that Ebola was originating from that hospital. And nobody really knew what it was. They thought it was malaria or something. But then he, spent time like collecting blood samples and actually convinced. So I'll just read this piece from NPR, right? So he persuaded one of the nuns who had the disease to fly with him to Kinshasa. He took blood samples before she died and sent it to Belgium, where they had an electron microscope to try to identify the culprit. Scientists then in the United States saw this was a new virus that caused hemorrhagic fever. They named it Ebola after the river near the village. The discovery, says Muyembe, was thanks to a consortium of research. But if you Google who discovered Ebola, and I did, you get a bunch of names, all of them white Western males. And Dr. Jean Muyembe has been written out of history, right? So this is what a toxic collaboration between the North and South looks like. It's very exploitative and does not recognize the significant contribution of Dr. Jean-Jacques Muyembe. And this is also another research that came out recently. If you think about these global health research education, there's a lot of disparities between them. Because, for example, like the one that I studied at in the US, most of these global health research educations are in the North. So only one, master's in global health is in Africa. You have 2 in Southeast Asia, but then the rest are all in Europe and America. And the cost of getting research training at these global health programs are, immensely, they're just too expensive, anywhere from, $20,000 to $60,000. So why does this asymmetry in collaborations exist? I think the main reason, it has to do with funding. So Southern collaborators often are not eligible to global health funding. And even when they are eligible, right, they have no access to trade secrets or even the grants writing capabilities and capacity. There are language barriers because a lot of global health research funds grants are in English, and so if your main language is French, that automatically cuts you out. And so this inequity of funding leads to a kind of dependency where LMIC researchers have to, they remain dependent on researchers from high-income countries for funding as well as research opportunities. And oftentimes, the researchers from the South cannot speak up against these toxic collaborations because they fear that they will lose their funding. And again, there's publication. So a lot of global health research is still published in Northern journals behind paywalls. Findings are often presented at global health conferences in New York and Geneva and Chicago, where a lot of the researchers from the South cannot attend for many reasons, including including visa restrictions and the cost of traveling for these conferences. And if you think, well, the good thing is some global health journals are now open access, right, which is great. But again, as Ulrich, you know too well, the cost of publishing as someone from LMIC is extremely expensive. So some journals up to $3,000 to publish a research article in them. So then, now that we've talked about the rock place, let's talk about the hard place. What's the hard place that we're stuck between? And in my view, the hard place is these are challenges that exist in the South and barriers to research in the South, and it's very nicely illustrated in this research paper that Ulrich and others published this past year. So what are excuse me, what are some of these challenges, right? Oftentimes, if you are a trainee or a student interested in research in an LMIC, there's usually lack of senior mentorship and role models that you can work with. So in my case, right, I had the opportunity to be at the University of Notre Dame, where I had an excellent supervisor who pushed me and advised me and encouraged me on research. But that's often not the case in a lot of LMICs. And it's kind of a chicken and egg situation because if there are no role models, then there's no mentorship. If there's no mentorship, then there are no role models, and so it's kind of a chicken and an egg situation. There's also limited research capacity, right? So this has to do with funding. African politicians and policymakers, they don't really value research as much as other countries do. If you have resources and you're trying to address, health and education issues, and research is one of the options, the outputs of research are not quite immediate to you. So for a lot of, the governments don't invest as much into research. But again, also private institutions, and big pharma that invest heavily in research in the US, they don't invest as much in African research, health research. So that leads to poor infrastructure and limited technical capacity. And this next one is one that I find really hard to swallow, is that even sometimes when there are experienced researchers and faculty members at universities and LMIC, sometimes they're quite unwilling to mentor students for a number of reasons. The one is that there's somehow this mindset that you have to remain at the top if you become a professor of, neurosurgery, right, and you're the one go-to person in the country, right, you can, yes, let's mentor a few people, but not mentor them enough to pass you, to become more than you. And this is deeply problematic in research, but also it doesn't advance health research and neurosurgery in Africa in general. And actually, to this point, I'll open it up for discussion later because I would love to get your thoughts on this and how to deal with it. There are also time limitations. So even if you're interested and, there's still, you have a full clinical practice here, you have to teach, there are other responsibilities that just make it extremely hard for researchers from LMICs to engage in research. And they don't really have assistants or that can help with that. And now there are also unethical practices that are emerging. So, gift authorship is something that you all have to be aware of. I think with the whole push for global health research equity, quite a number of researchers in the North are reaching out to researchers in the South to include them on the papers, right? But it's not necessarily that they value the input of researchers from LMICs, but it's that if you don't include enough authors from the LMIC country, you're going to get in trouble, and so they just stick authors on there without really having the authors from LMIC's actual contribution. So this is something that you all have to be aware of, and it's not helpful to be in this position where you're seen as as a gift author. It doesn't help you, and it frankly doesn't help anybody. But also predatory journals. So you have to look out for predatory journals. These are journals that are not really registered in in databases, but they just prey on researchers. I get quite a number of these emails, them inviting me to contribute. And sometimes you have to pay this. There's really no review process. And when you publish in these journals, they just go and die. So you have to look out for these predatory journals. So what's the solution? How do we get out of being stuck between this rock and this hard place? It's a hard thing, but it seems to me that there are two solutions. There's a short-term solution to the problem, and there's a long-term solution. So in the here and now, for you, young African neurosurgery aspirants and researchers, what can you do? Like I said, it's, as I was preparing this talk, the theme that kept arising was research mentorship. That was vital to my research career. And I think it's going to be hard to move forward without having these mentors and role models. And so try to find a research mentor. I think it's great that you all have this platform where you can connect with each other, but also connect with potential mentors from around Africa, but also from the diaspora. There are quite a number of African researchers in the diaspora who are willing to mentor and want to advance health research on the continent. But then there are also, again, you can find great mentors at American and European universities and Indian around the world. So there are quite a number of potential role models and mentors that you can reach out to. Write till you drop. What I mean by that is, you improve your research capabilities and your writing skills by writing. The more you write, the better you become at it. Right? So you don't necessarily need, at this point, to be producing original research, especially if you don't have the mentors and if you don't have um, the capacity to do that. But you can always, again, keep up with the research literature. You can write reports, you can write letters to the editor, you can write commentaries, you can write editorials, and publish these. And so by so doing, you improve your research skills, you stay on top of the literature, but then you also improve your writing capacity, capability. There are also a lot of free resources that you can use online to learn about research methodology, the research process. And I'm sure Ulrich has shared quite a number of these with you all. So on your own, that's the beauty of the internet. On your own, you can find some of these resources to improve your research skills. But if you do have an opportunity to partner with someone from the global north or an institution from the global north, there are a few things that you have to keep in mind, right? So the first is, set the rules of engagement from the beginning and emphasize mutually beneficial collaborations, right? So you can do that. I mean, ask yourself, ask them, do you want me to work for you or work with you? That will usually determine whether you're a data collector or whether you are actually a true collaborator. And you should have these open discussions about the expectations and responsibilities from the very beginning. Yes, it's uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable, but it's also very necessary. The other thing is when you have the opportunity, always emphasize funding equity, right? So when if you're putting together a research proposal with collaborators from the north, you can make sure that there's components in that proposal that focus on building capacity at your institution for yourself, training, PhD, infrastructure, but also data analysis. All of these things are necessary, especially because research capacity in the south is not as strong as in the north. So you should work with your northern collaborators to emphasize this funding equity. And have formal agreements, right, if needed. Just so at the end it's not that you guys are not on the same page. And this is something that AFAN is already doing, but collaborate with each other. So we as south to south need to collaborate with, if you're in Cameroon, UB, why don't we collaborate with more researchers at UB? Cameroon and Botswana could collaborate on some projects in Sudan, So this will again help us get out of this being stuck in the middle. Long-term solutions. This long-term solutions, they've been very nicely stated in this editorial commentary by Professor Yap Boom from Cameroon. There are a few things that we can do in the long term. So we need to increase funding. I mean, funding is going to be necessary. So we need to find ways to make a strong case to politicians and policymakers on the value of research that is conducted in Africa by Africans for African problems. And so this, when you're designing your research proposals and projects, keep this in mind, is how does this make a stronger case for additional funding for your research, right? Is there a value that funders will see in funding your work? But then also in the process, we need to establish institutional frameworks, that create local research communities and fosters mentorship. This one is even much longer term, but very important. We need to increase the the impact and value of local journals. Because researchers want and like to publish in high impact journals. If it's seen that if you publish in high impact journals, your work is more likely to be cited by other journals. But it kind of creates this vicious cycles where even we African researchers don't really, and I'm part of this, right? Don't really publish in our own journals. So our own journals, and we don't cite our own journals. So our own journals, quote unquote, impact doesn't increase over time. So, there needs to be a concerted effort to produce high quality research and publish those research in African journals so that over time our journals have high impact. And I see, again, AFAN is already doing a tremendous job at this. And so I congratulate you for that, and we need to do more of that. So we need also to find better ways to reward research contributions, including mentorship. One of the biggest things in global health research and research in general is that, if you look at this paper by Prof. Yap Boom, when anybody goes to look at the research paper, the two names that they're looking at is first author, and then maybe second author and last authorship positions, right? So Mark and Yvonne and Elizabeth Bukusi, even though they may have contributed, equally to the paper, they're not recognized as much. And there are quite a number of people, I'm sure, that may have contributed to this paper that are not acknowledged because they're not authorship. So we need to find a way to better ways to ensure that the contributions, especially of young researchers, are acknowledged and recognized. This is Dr. Mike Steer. He's a pioneer in pancreatic research. He did research for many decades at Beth Israel Hospital in the US, in Boston. And he was also the executive director for the program in global surgery. A good friend, and I consider him a mentor. He passed away about over a year ago. But this is what he said. He says the true success of a mentee is in the mentor's is the mentor's ultimate reward. And I think this is the mindset that we should be going forward with, right? A lot of you, all of you are going to be, research leaders in your communities, and you're going to be quite good at it, right? But you shouldn't see, training younger people as something that will be a competition or a hindrance to your academic success, right? But you should also see it as a success, right? If your mentees are incredibly successful, and actually, I believe Mike, Dr. Steer, saw like if his mentees did better than him and challenged him, that was his ultimate success. So this is a mindset that I think we, young African researchers should have in order to, again, this is a long-term solution, right? So that, we advance health research on the continent. Okay, so I'll close with this. Global health is still very colonial in my view, but we need to decolonize it. It will not decolonize itself, and each one of us, has a crucial role to play in that. So I'd encourage you to think about that as you move forward in your career. So I'll close there. This is my email and my Twitter. Feel free to reach out to me with anything, questions, anything at all. Thank you. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Desmond. This was fantastic, really balanced. You brought out the challenges for the global north and for the global south for young researchers as well as more experienced researchers. That was really great and definitely food for thought. There's a lot to discuss here. Before we go forward, I'd like to acknowledge I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Alkaya, Blake Alkaya, who's faculty at Harvard Medical School. He's here and he's posted a few comments in here to help folks come up with find free resources as well as okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Dr. Accra is probably one of the greatest advocates of equity in research, especially global surgery. He's an ENT. Thank you so much for being here. If you have any question, please type them in the chat box, and then we can. I'll be reading them out to Desmond. We can discuss these things together. Okay, so the first question I see here is from Gideon. So Gideon asked this question, which is, what can young researchers in the global north do to make sure that inequity doesn't continue?
Right. Young researchers in the global north. So there's something that, you know, it's clear, is that young researchers in the global north are also interested in advancing their research careers as well, right? So you have to be aware of that. It's not a bad thing, but when you, as a young researcher in the global north, reach out or want to collaborate with other young researchers in the global south, you have to keep that in the back of your mind to ask yourself whether you know, this research collaboration that I'm starting with you know, someone in the global south, is it really equitable? Is it really collaborative? But then also remember that there are access to resources for you, at least for most people in the global north, that are not available to researchers in the global south, especially young researchers. So access to journals and access to funding. So if you keep this in the back of your mind, you always try to find ways to support your fellow collaborators in the south, keeping in mind that they don't have as much access to these resources that you do. I mean, I know this, and I feel like I've worked you know, at institutions in the global north. You know, I have a master's degree from a university in the global north, and so even when we're doing our master's degree, I had access to resources that my collaborators in Zambia didn't, right? And so, you know, I always have to keep in mind that, you know, I always have to find ways to support my collaborators in Zambia, you know, providing, you know, access to research articles, but then also being supportive, because again, like I mentioned, one of the barriers is, you know, if you're medical students or residents in a hospital in Zambia, there are time constraints, and you know, you have to provide care. You know, you have to teach in some instances. So I keep that in the back of my mind. So I guess the answer to that would be just to keep your own privilege in check, and to support your collaborators in the global south and make sure that it's equitable.
Thank you so much. I think A question by Dr. Ola Romini, who I'd like to congratulate for the PhD. We saw that on Twitter. Congratulations. So the question is a follow-up, I guess, from Gideon's question, which is, how can young early career researchers in the diaspora help facilitate research back home in a way that is helpful whilst avoiding being a parachute?
So young
Yeah.
researchers in the diaspora.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say just do what Ulrich is doing, right? I mean, you know, in the past year, you know, Ulrich has had the opportunity to, and I mean, you know, over the past 9 years, right, I've had the opportunity to you know, work, to be at Harvard and be at all these institutions, and we've learned quite a bit, right? And so, you know, I really actually look up to Ulrich for this in what you've done in reaching out to the young researchers on the continent and providing them with mentorship. I think that's crucial. That's something that we in the diaspora should do more of, is providing mentorship to young folks. But then, again, things like teaching them, providing them with advice that, you know, otherwise they wouldn't have access to unless they've been part of the system and understand, you know, some of these traits, right? You know, and with that, I mean, I saw that, you know, Yvan, Lauren, and Juan, right, got their abstracts accepted into the WFNS conference. So congratulations to all three of you. But so these are things that we in the diaspora can do is once we've learned, we should provide mentorship and support and advice on how to go about doing research.
Thank you so much for the shout out. I will say this, right? It does help to know what the realities are for your local collaborators, whether you are from the diaspora or whether you're not originally from the global south, because there are a lot of things that you would not know, and it makes sense, right? That you wouldn't know that these are the difficulties that your colleagues from the global south are going through. And I think the easiest way then becomes, besides talking about the research project, just speaking with them as regularly as possible. It gets you to know, hey, oh, you find out that maybe you say this thing and they don't understand because they've never seen it, they've never heard of it, or they don't have access to it. And then you find out that, oh my goodness, these are the barriers that they actually face. This is what is difficult for them. When you come up with that project as well, from the get-go, you know, you have to have those expectations to be laid down clearly. And I think one of the biggest challenges of barriers has been that folks tend to have informal agreements that make it in such a way that it really, in the end, there's always going to be someone that finds themselves not getting the most out of it. So personally, what I do is when we're working, for transparency, we always work, all of us, all authors always are on the same Google Docs. Everyone contributes, for example, using suggestion mode. What that does is everybody knows what everyone has done. If you don't have that, everyone thinks they've worked so hard that they deserve, for example, first authorship because they don't know what the others did. But when you put everyone together on the same document and everyone is using just a simple thing like suggestion mode, someone will be like, hey, you know what, it took me 6 hours, but from what I saw this other person doing, it probably took them, 18 hours, and they know from the get-go that this is what they can deserve. Another thing we do is we distribute those roles, the credit roles described by Elsevier for being an authorship. Some folks will be doing visualizations, doing the visual abstracts, doing the figures for the manuscript. Some folks will be doing, so you really distribute it out, but distributing equally means like, okay, are you interested in this and can you do it? You have to ask that other question, because unfortunately, again, some folks don't have internet access easily. It makes it difficult for them to watch certain videos on YouTube that could help them do a certain task, or they don't readily have access to certain documents, you know, or certain software. So there's a lot of those things, but it comes with you speaking with the folks regularly, and then being really honest about it. It's fine that you as well, when you're doing that project, you should be able to get something out of it. I think it's fair for someone to try and get a publication. It's not because you're from a global node that you don't deserve a publication. You definitely deserve it, but you should equally ask yourself, what do the others need, and how can I help them to get it in such a way that I get what I want and they get what they want. That is the best thing out of it. That would be my contribution
And
to that.
it has to be mutually beneficial. And I will say this, Ulrich, you know, I just moved to Ghana, and this is the first time that I feel like I'm truly, you know, a researcher from the South. So something like access to research articles, right? So being at Harvard, you know, there's kind of it's very easy to get access to any article you want. You know, if it's not on PubMed, open access, you can reach out to the librarian and they'll get it to you in like 30 minutes, right? But that's not the case here. And so I saw Blake has given you access to a website that you should definitely not use to get research articles. But again, these are some of the things that you have to keep in mind.
Yeah, thank you so much. And there's probably one of the greatest questions here. I was actually going to ask this because we have to speak about it. Olaloa says, we are advised to always publish in, you know, the international, more recognizable journals, but you're encouraging us to publish in local journals so as to raise its impact factor. I would like you to expand on that.
That's an excellent question. So that I said that's a long-term solution. It's a hard thing because, Ola, you're right that any researcher, especially a young researcher, you know, you saw I posted like, you know, oh, you know, I've got an article in the Lancet, you know, BMJ and all of these prestigious journals. So everybody wants to publish in these journals. And so we end up not publishing in our own African journals, you know, Pan-African medical journals and South African medical journals, even our own local Cameroonian journals, which I don't know, by the way, which is terrible. But it sets up a vicious cycle where our local journals will not grow, the impact will not grow. And so that's why I say it has to be a concerted effort by young African researchers in general. And I think this is in fact happening. You know, there are a lot of discussions around this research equity that's happening on Twitter and everywhere else where we're saying, you know, we can't keep publishing in journals that we don't even have access to, right? So a lot like these discussions are good because then we can make a concerted effort, which Afan is already doing, right? Ulrich and the team, you guys are already doing this. You're publishing in African journals. And by doing this and publishing high quality research, in the long term, the capacity of our journals will grow. But in reality, that means there are some sacrifices that will have to be made, right? You can see them as sacrifices in the short term, and in the long term, you know, it will increase, you know, research productivity and the impact of our own journals. But that's an excellent question. I mean, I don't know if Ulrich, anybody else has any ideas about that.
Thank you so much, Des. Great response. I'll just speak about this from my perspective, which is not a perspective for everyone, right? And from my own experience. Let's state the facts first, and before we go ahead. You publish in the high impact factor journals, then you get the great recognition because one New England Journal of Medicine article, one Lancet paper, you know, whether we like it or not, you know, it's what maybe 100 of those publications in our local journals. Another fact, That is the case because our local journals have low impact factors. So what is the impact factor? Well, we know it's about citations from previous years. And how are those citations influenced? The citations are influenced based on the impact that the research had, quote unquote impact. So how many people read it and found it interesting to discuss about it, right? So then it becomes about visibility. So yes, there is some sense of quality of research in that, but the quality of research relies heavily on those who are submitting research to the journal. The quality, for example, at New England Journal of Medicine will almost always be high because there's a certain level, a caliber of scientists submitting to those journals. But then there's equally the quality of the reviewers. First things first, if you have the expertise, whether you're from the diaspora, whether you're local, try to be a reviewer for our local journals. Because if you're there, then you will help improve the quality of the research. Not by saying that, understand that some folks didn't get the mentorship and everything. Not by saying no, reject. Find, is it interesting? Is it new based on our context? And then try and suggest to them, hey, do this. Maybe you should do this about the statistics. Maybe you should share, you should change this. That is the very first step. So be reviewers, please. Be reviewers for our journals. And we have fantastic journals. Second thing, always disseminate your research post-publication. That's one thing we don't do. You know, visual abstracts, be on ResearchGate, be on LinkedIn. When you publish in English, if you have a local language, make sure those visual abstracts are equally in the local language. Is it in French? Is it in Lingala, Swahili? Make sure you have those, because when you do that, then it's easier for other folks to actually go to that article because they get to see it. Disseminate those visual abstracts on the media that local folks have. It's often not Twitter, it's Facebook and WhatsApp, usually in most of our African countries. So you need to have them there. People need to see them, people need to talk about them, because then when you do that, some younger folk or some consultant writing a thesis will remember, I saw this article about this stuff, and they'll go and find it, and then they'll cite it. So it increases your citation, your own H index as an individual, but it will equally increase the citation for the journals. Now, to be fair, when you're a very young researcher, it's difficult for you to go for our local journals. But equally, it's extremely difficult as a young researcher to have your first article in a very high impact factor journal. So you see, you're equally stuck in what the theme of today's work, right? So I would say if you're really young researcher, early career researcher, when you work with those bigger folks who already have the experience and they're trying to publish in a high impact factor journals, definitely do it. And then when you get the chance every once in a while, try as much as you can to submit in a local journal. Try and read those local journals and write letters to the editors if you feel like something was said, it wasn't really right. So that is how I conceived it. And we try to get that 50-50. So if you look at the AFAN publications, we are almost at that balance where in neurosurgery, we get some world neurosurgery articles, some ACTA, some, you know, because we need to do that for people to actually respect, for example, AFAN research, but equally we try to get others like in the Pan-African Medical Journal. So that is my perspective on this. Let me check another question. Hold on, just finding. Oh, okay. So this question is: at what level should you consider being a reviewer? I think I can leave this question to Des, maybe. Desmond, to you.
Well, that's a good question, and one that I'm not sure that I particularly have a good answer to. I guess different journals have different expectations of reviewers, right? So I believe, and actually would love to get Blake's input on this as well, but some journals expect you to have a certain amount of like a degree, PhD or at least a master's degree, that you've had some publications in some cases, but I think it's from journal to journal. But if a journal reaches out to you to be a reviewer, go through the paper and and make, or at least through the abstract, you know, they usually give you the option of assessing, you know, whether you're capable and available to review the paper. So go through the abstract, you know, if the paper is there, glimpse through it, you know, to see if you actually have the capability and the capacity to review the content, but also the quality of that paper.
Yeah, I was just going to add that if you're trying to be a reviewer, if you want to be a reviewer, you can work towards that. Before we get Blake to say something, you can work towards that by registering on Publons. So if you go there, you can register and actually learn how to review an article. And you can actually, with Publons, you can actually do reviews and then have other reviewers review your review, and it helps you grow. So that is one thing I'll definitely advise. Please, Blake, go. Could you enlighten us about reviewing?
I don't have much to add, actually. I think everything you stated in the Publons advice was the only reasonable addition I was going to offer. With, you know, my experience becoming a reviewer really came about after just submitting papers to journals, and then you get registered on their list. But I do think that there are ways for you to register your interest in being a reviewer. So if you have expertise in X, Y, or Z, you know, first of all, you sign up for a journal online, just so they have you as a registered member. And then you can sort of put the research topics that you're interested in. And frankly, journals are desperate for reviewers. So just emailing an assistant editor or an associate editor and say, hey, I'm Mr. or Dr. So-and-so, I would, or Mrs., oh my God, please don't. I would love to review for your journal. I'm really interested in X, Y, or Z, and they will email you for sure.
Yes, thank you so much. Saktai commends you, Desmond. So thanks for the talk. Very familiar with your work here in Tanzania. Happy to see the man behind the papers. So my question is, have you ever been or seen colleagues who were put in a position where they had to sacrifice, for example, authorship position for the sake of the paper's recognition or to increase the chance for the paper to be published? And what is your advice to tackle these situations? Yeah, oh my goodness, that is the tough one.
Actually, could you, I'm not sure I understand the entire question.
So the question is, have you ever been in a situation where there is a change in authorship position because you want to publish in a certain journal?
Oh, so you get someone more senior to be the main author, and then you sacrifice that paper, that position. I've not personally been in that position. I mean, I guess it depends. You know, if you are making the choice, the choice to sacrifice your first authorship position for someone more senior, which I don't think you should have to be put in that position, or, you know, someone is making you give up that position. I'm not sure I have some. Ulrika, is that something that's happened to you? Okay, maybe you can answer that one.
Yeah, I've learned to, those who have worked with me know this, I've learned to run away from a lot of projects. I've learned to say no. There are certain projects I've worked on, like gone really far on them, and then when I see something I'm not quite okay with, I say, I'm sorry. Like, obviously you say, hey, can we not do this? And if they insist, I'm just like, yeah, just forget, just take me off of it. Because what I've learned is, unfortunately, once you do it the first time, it becomes a habit. They will try to do it the second time, another time, and a third time, and a fourth time. So unfortunately, you're not in a position to force them not to do it, right? And with those with whom we're working, they know this. Like, I've always told them, like, high impact factor journals, they're great, but you shouldn't always be running after them, because if you did, your research and did the right, you had the protocol, got input from the get-go, normally your paper shouldn't be way off. Like, there should be issues with it, but it shouldn't be way off. So wherever you publish it, you can get people to read it. And for me, the biggest impact is not from the scientific community, it's from the local community that you did your research with or on. So that's why I would say that.
Yeah, oh, I completely agree with that. And I want to be clear, from my personal perspective, that scenario should never happen. If somebody's done the work to be a first author, they should be first author. And it is never a legitimate argument, again, in my personal opinion, to sacrifice authorship for a higher chance of being accepted. I think that's insanity, to be honest. And I think that that's also indicative of a toxic relationship, my personal input.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, let's see. Keep the questions coming. I mean, we can clearly see that this is a very interesting topic, and everyone wants to discuss this. Right, let me see. So let me ask you this one, Desmond. Talking about, again, being put in that tough position, you, like me, quite a few folks here are originally from an LMIC. You have the HIC affiliations, and sometimes you find yourself in that position where we've spoken about the global north, but global south, our own people doing stuff that, you know, puts you really unethical. We said one of them, you work with a group of collaborators, and maybe it's a student or a resident, and you have this one professor who was never involved on a paper or anything, and then they just come and kick them off the paper, for example. Or sometimes it's salami slicing. So it puts you in that tough position where you're the link between your HIC collaborators and your LMIC collaborators. How do you deal with that? And what's your advice?
Yeah, that's tough, because, you know, if you're a junior person on a research paper, even if you've contributed quite a bit and the senior person has not contributed anything really, right? It's still going to be hard for you. Like, if they come and they say, you know, we need to move this person off the paper, or add this my friend to the paper. You're kind of in a pickle, because in a pickle, that's a very northern thing to say. You're kind of
You're in a pepper.
Yeah, in pepper, hot pepper, because I mean, you know, this is you know, your faculty or one of your supervisors that you have to deal with on a regular basis, and you know also that if you don't comply, right, you know, that may be the end of your academic. Like, they're going to make things extremely tough for you, and so I hate when those types of things happen, and I think it's absolutely unethical that it persists. But you're in a tough situation, and especially if you don't have other faculty members that can support you, because this person is so senior that people are afraid to confront, you know, him or her. Yeah, it's a tough one. I would say maybe, you know, sometimes you just have to comply. You know, you do what you need to do to keep moving forward. And I think I also tell Ulrich, I think, you know, you also have to find ways to build your own like muscles. I don't know if that's the best way to do it, but there are some things like that when you're in that kind of situation, you just have to tolerate until you get to a position where you are more stable and you're more independent, and you don't do the same things to your mentees, right? Because you know how terrible it is. But it's a tough one. But again, depending, if you have faculty members, you know, that are supportive, you can always seek advice from them. But in all frankness, you know, you may just have to swallow the pill, and move forward.
Yeah.
And that's true of so many things in our setting, unfortunately.
Okay, let's take the last set of questions. We'll take them real quick fire. Okay, so Gideon asked, when do you think is the right time to discuss authorship positions?
Oh, you do that at the beginning, huh? I do that at the beginning. I've been in some situations where, you know, you work on the paper at the end, and at the end, you know, there's different conflicts. You know, someone thinks that they should be a senior author when in fact all they've done is edited their name on the Google Doc. You know, change their affiliation. You know, put a full stop here and there. So from my experience, I've learned that you have to address that at the very beginning, you know, when you're ideating about the research proposal, so that it's actually clear that, you know, if someone is taking these esteemed positions, you know, senior last authorship positions, there are responsibilities that come with it. And I mean, if you're an author at all, you know, there's responsibilities that come with it. But I would advise to have the awkward conversation at the very beginning.
All right. Thank you so much. The other questions that were asked by Olaluwa and Darwin, you will find the responses on our YouTube channel. We spoke about it in research methodologies, so you have the answers there. The final one we'll take is this from, I think I can answer this one real quickly, Vaishnavi, about how do you find a country's medical journal to be able to advocate for it. For Africa, you have the African Journals Online, which is a repository of all African journals. You can just go there and find, you have all the types of journals. You find health, medical journals, and then you'll find the countries, the entire list. And it gives you enough information to be able to find it really quickly and easily. Yes. Thank you, Blake. Yep. Thank you so much, Desmond. This was very interesting, necessary as well, because we cannot keep saying decolonize global health and not do our own part. And here, you are definitely doing the part. The global South has to do its part and hold itself accountable. If we're going to, if we're going to deserve those authorship positions on those research papers, it cannot just be because we are nationals from the country in which the research was done. We have to do the work, and that is the message that you echoed here. And we're so happy that we were able to share this with you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Blake, for attending and for enlightening us with all this information.
I was enlightened. It's always a pleasure to hear from Des and you, Ulrich. This was great.
Yeah, thanks, Ulrich, for inviting me and for this very stimulating conversation. Like I said, I've been, you know, so impressed by the research that you're all doing and how fast this network has grown. Looking forward to following the research that you'll do and the work that you'll do. Feel free to reach out to me. You know, Ulrich can share my email address and my contact information with the team. If there's any way that I can be of support. But thank you all.
Thanks.